here. So it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you Dr. Inga Bowman-May and Neil May. And for some of you, it probably is an introduction, I'm guessing. Neil and Inga have been with INF for the last 5.5 or so years, since 2015. And this week, we're welcoming them back. We're also celebrating with them the end of their ministry with INF. And we're farewelling them and blessing them onto the next stage of their life. Many of you would know that this church has had a long history of a connection with Nepal, starting off with Phil and Jenny Davis. Phil was the IT guy in the video there. They went over to Nepal in 2009. Alex and Rowan Barwick were over in 2014. And there's a number of other people in the church who have also been over for short visits as well. So it's a long connection. And Inga and Neil have been connected with the church for some 15 or so years, initially when they were working out at both Yuendamu and Hermannsburg, and then moving into Alice Springs. They have spent a lot of time in the territory, and during that time they've gained a lot of skills, and it was those skills and knowledge that they were able to take to Nepal and use with INF. Inga had been working with Indigenous mothers and their babies, both in Alice Springs and in remote communities. Neil had been working in the domestic violence area, prevention programs, working with drug and alcohol and suicide prevention. So it was then back in early 2015 that we commissioned them as a church and we sent them out. Inga had accepted a role as a public health advisor with INF's maternal, newborn and child health program. They left us early in 2015, did some more training and preparation, and arrived in July in Nepal, just a few months after the earthquakes had happened. So it was a pretty challenging time for them. So since then, they've continued to work in those same areas. Inga has been involved in maternal health. Neil has been working with communities, supporting them, doing a lot of training. And they're now back here, visiting. They're actually back living in Adelaide. And we're going to find out a little bit more about their story tonight as they come to the couch. And Gavin is going to ask them a few questions. They've got a lot to share. I think we'll actually find some different stories as well, I guess. If you were here this morning, they might be a bit the same, but they might be a bit different as well. Do take the opportunity to catch up with them afterwards or during the week. I know their calendar is filling, but if you'd like to know more about their work than you hear tonight, please catch up with them. And if later you think, oh, gee, I would have loved to, come and see me or Alex or Melissa or any of us, and we can put you in touch with Neil and Inga, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Sue. So here we are again. So for those of you who weren't here this morning, similar vibe. But what we found from this morning in terms of stories being shared, and I was just chatting with a few people after the service, just different aspects of what Neil and Inga had to share with us this morning resonated with people. I won't give anything too away, but certainly some of the stories and some of the personal lessons that these guys have learnt are lessons that we too can take away and apply to our own missional thinking, perhaps even our own personal walk with Jesus. And so can I encourage you, as I mentioned before, this isn't just about informing you of what was going on. This is actually an opportunity to hear from God and to allow him to speak through the stories that these guys have to share with us tonight. So can I encourage you to do that? So can we first of all welcome these guys here? It's great to have you here. Gosh. Is that a Nepali thing? I don't know that one. I'm not familiar.
No, there's just a Neil thing.
Just a Neil thing.
From my heart to my head to you.
Oh, nice. I like that. Yeah. Well, maybe we can adopt that. So, obviously, thank you, Sue, for doing such a great introduction. We won't spend a lot of tonight talking about your work specifically that you did. What I really feel would be great for us as a church to hear tonight is some of the things that God has been teaching you, some of the lessons that God has placed in your heart as a result of your 5 years working in Nepal, and no doubt many more years praying for and and loving that people. So to start with, start off, Neil. I suppose 5 years on the field in Nepal. I'm sure there was many ups and downs, but what is a lesson? What is something God you feel has taught you in that 5 years? How are you different now from when you started as a result of your work in Nepal?
Humbleness.
What was that, sorry?
Humbleness.
Humbleness.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. When you go out into the field, regardless of how professional you are or how well you are socially established, you're a baby. You're in kindergarten. You know nothing. You are nowhere and you are no one. And you need to establish yourself. And in order to do that, God strips away very gently those layers which you work so hard to build up. But at the same time, He builds you up in appreciation for the culture, for the language, for the way in which people live. There are many challenging ways in order to change one's thinking and one's heart, and you need to learn how to humble yourself every moment of every day in order to learn.
So what did that humbling look like for you personally? Because I couldn't agree more. New context, new culture, and even for people here tonight, whether they're planning to go international or just entering a new realm where there's different language, different ethnicities, all that kind of stuff, that is a very true experience for each one of us. For you personally, going to Nepal, what was one example of some of that stripping away, to use your language, for you, Neil?
He taught me that I needed to step back, to keep quiet, and to listen, and to learn. Because, as I said, I knew nothing. And although I was enthusiastic and had ideas of myself and my capability, he kept reminding me all the time, and I don't know how many times I went to prayer about it because I needed reinforcing. But gradually over time, he redeveloped me into to fully appreciate what was around me and to see it through his eyes.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
You know, we can look at our environment and we can make an assumption or a judgment, and quite often it's what we look at. But when we look deeper into the way that God sees things and we look to the heart of the situation, we find out the real jewel of the crown are the people and their culture. And this I needed to learn, even though I thought I knew it.
Well, isn't that amazing? And what I love about that is that's a lesson that obviously it's amazing how it necessitates that you learn something like that in Nepal, as in you have to, otherwise you simply can't function. But the fact that here you are at the end of your time in Nepal, at least in terms of INF, coming back to what will be Adelaide, and yet that lesson still rings true, no doubt, perhaps all over again in some respects.
I'm practicing exactly the same things over here as I did over there.
That's brilliant. That's fantastic. And how about yourself? How have you changed in the last 5 years as a result of what God has been teaching you? Perhaps to do with, obviously, your work in Nepal, that was your context, but it can be other factors as well. What's changed in you?
Sometimes difficult to know how we have changed,
but it is. Yeah.
But one thing that, another thing to the one this morning, is that just trusting God. And it sounds very, we all need to trust God, but Sue kind of touched on it, when we first went over, we knew God had called us to go over there, and you sent us, and then you go over there, and then you have all kinds of challenges, and we had issues with visa and all kinds of other things, and we were supposed to move to a particular place, but we couldn't, so we temporarily moved somewhere else, and just hanging on to that call, or hanging on and just saying, God, you called us here, and I have no idea, I haven't spent a day in the office, but you've called us here. and just use us in whatever that is, and just also trusting that He cares for us. And maybe one little episode, we moved eventually after almost 1.5 years, moved to Nepalganj, where Phil and Jenny are as well. And Nepalganj is not the nicest place if you just go there. It's very, very hot, obviously no air conditioning, open sewage running along the streets. It's much improved now, but we knew we should go there, but it was still hard, and we just prayed that God would give us those rose-colored glasses, or in German, I'm German, and we actually say pink glasses in German, that make you see the good things and maybe blur the things that are not so good. And we really prayed for that as we moved to Nepalganj, that God would just show us the beauty of that place. And God has a lot of humor. We actually ended up in a house that is pink, that was pink, so the outside bright pink, and even our apartment in that house, bright pink walls. In the beginning I thought I'm going to go mad living here, but it was just this daily reminder that God gave us actually those rose-colored glasses to start appreciating, you know, the beauty and the people. And actually we didn't feel we suffered there. You know, it was hot and it was, you know, tough, but God just gives you those rose-colored glasses and blesses you in a way if you go where you're supposed to go.
Well, you might have already answered this question a little bit. I wanted to jump in a little bit earlier, and you just kind of pushed forward, but it was not at all. It was that sense of going, you know, when you speak as though you have had such conviction about the call, even in the midst of difficult circumstances, particularly in those early days, probably longer through. Like, what are the things that God does that gives you that conviction to hold on to that call and know for sure that it was God's call? Because many of us here, whether it be international or somewhere local, there is a sense in which God is prompting something within us, but in the face of adversity, you can be like, well, second guessing whether it is in fact God. I'm sure you understand the experience. So like, what kind of helped you?
Yeah, and it is very difficult.
that?
Like when we came earlier this year, when we came back because of COVID, to make that decision, like, do you want us to stay? Do you want us to come back? Phil and Jenny stayed, and just, I think it's circumstances, it's praying for wisdom, it's listening to maybe elders in your church, in our church in Nepal, and just we have always prayed that if it's time to move on, for God to give us open doors.
Yeah, right.
And even when we went to Nepal, when we weren't sure, when we knew something else was coming and it was time to move on from Central Australia, we just prayed for open doors and then just, you know, gently touched certain doors, and the ones that flung open were the ones to go through, and that was Nepal for us.
Yeah, and I really actually, I really love that imagery of open doors. Sometimes it can feel like there are multiple open doors and you kind of have to touch them a little bit to see what does in fact open. Neil, yeah.
Yeah, there was a long time there where the visas were going up and down like a yo-yo.
Yeah.
And we didn't know who or what we were from 1 minute to the next. And this strips away your self-confidence, your enthusiasm, and you're really left in a void thinking, where do I go? I have no idea. Who am I? I have no idea. You have no answers. When we called out to God in these times, He just instantly brought about a peace. He said, you know, I will take care of this.
Yeah.
And He did. Until, human trait, I picked it up again, being the next day. And again, I had to give it back to Him. But each time, I had this overwhelming sense of just peace and quietness as He took that burden from my shoulders.
Yeah.
And several times we would get word maybe 2-3 weeks, a month later, that a church or a congregation or a family group somewhere had, on that particular moment, been praying for us. Yeah. And if that doesn't bring you to tears and gratitude and humble you before God, then I don't know what does.
Amazing, yeah. So in preparation for this chat, I did ask you guys to choose one photo each, which for those of you, this was a very big pain to Neil. He is an avid photographer. And you should have seen the look on his face when I said one photo. It's like the blood drained out. It's like, how could I possibly? Nevertheless, I insisted. And so each of you chose a photo to reflect on that potentially at face value looks simple, but actually carries a much larger story. Rich, do you mind putting up Neil's photo? Just here. Now, when I look at this, and I did hear obviously what you said this morning, but I remember my first instinct here as I saw this, it reminded me of my brief time in Nepal in the bazaars and the markets, and actually the aroma actually is what kind of first came to mind when I saw this, like the smell of these. But tell us, Neil, why is this photo significant for you? What message does it carry for you?
Well, sugar and spice and all things nice.
That's right.
This is actually one of many shops in the bazaar down in Nepalganj that sells spices, and this is how we buy them. The bazaar itself was one of my favourite places. It was absolutely, totally bizarre in every sense of the word. There were people there from multiple people groups. And many had come over from the border. India was only 5 k's away from where we were. So it was a huge mix of people coming and going and selling and colour and smells. And I used to love going down this little lane, which was called Spice Lane for obvious reasons. And just looking at all these. But what does this tell me? This tells me not only the people and the culture who were there making up the craziness of the bazaar, but also the measurement that they have there. You know, in God's work, we can take a measure in our cup and we can fill it up. But He teaches us to overflow the cup. He teaches us to give that little bit more. And that is what these full measurements tell me all the time, that His work is never done. And when we give everything we have, we can still give a little bit more. The spices themselves, apart from bringing a lot of pleasure to everybody, signify to me the work that farmers do. And farmers are very hard working. Most of this is done by hand, not machines. And they may spend months and months and months just to get one bag of spice in order to sell it to the markets. So this is very precious reflection on the hardness and the work of farmers, and farmers are
amazing.
Are close to my heart.
Well, people are clearly close to your heart, you know, and but I also love that imagery of, you know, as the psalmist say, talk about the cup runneth over, you know, that sense of God's provision, but also our responsibility, you know, to extend and in some respects reflect the hard work that you saw in the people themselves. That's amazing.
The other thing that is in this picture is the colour. As you can see, there are many colours there. Dress over in Nepal, particularly with the women, is just a smorgasbord of colour. If these colours came over into the Western world would freak out because they just are not that bold enough to put colours together the way Nepalis do. And when you see a street of people walking along, it's just this whole smorgasbord of a moving landscape or a moving painting. It's just, it takes your breath away. And this is what this represents even more, but I think I better hand it over to Ian, otherwise I'll keep talking.
Sorry, I can hear your creativity and the artistic flair coming at you there, Neil. Sorry, Rich, do you mind going over to Ian's photo? A little bit more human, but lots of colour nevertheless. Tell us why this photo was the one that you chose.
Yeah, as Neil said, very, very colourful. I just absolutely love that photo. I love the women in this photo. There are 3 of my colleagues that I worked very closely with. on the left, on the far left, that's Esther. She works in monitoring and evaluation for INF. Then next to me with the classes is Kanti. She's a supervisor for the disability program. And then on the other side is Supriya, and she's a supervisor in the maternal and child health project. And my role was really to support them to do the work. And on that particular day, we went out to visit one of the mothers groups that INF is working with, to just see how the work is going. And when you go to the villages, people always really welcome you, and that's hence the flowers that we had, because they're really so appreciative of the work that INF does. And what evolved a little bit over time was that, yes, my role was to work and support these women, but it also became a little bit like a mentoring relationship, because the status of women in Nepal is quite low, and it's quite a male-dominated society, and obviously in INF we try to counteract that, but it's still quite difficult for young professional women to work and to progress, and so we've really developed very close relationships, and like, for example, Esther on the left there was approached for an arranged marriage, and we worked through that, and she's now happily married, has a little boy, and yeah, so just being part of the life of these women. And you can see Supriya and Kanti, they have the Binti there, so they are Hindu women. And in INF we have that mixed staff, so we have Christians who work and also Hindus who work as staff, and that's part of, I guess, our witness as well to the community where we work, but also among the staff. And that's why I like that photo as well, because it really also brings in that spiritual task or ministry that we were involved in, witnessing to the people around us and being part of a church there as well.
Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think it's worth touching on, because it's often a question that comes to mind, and I think you guys would have some good insight into this, particularly what you're talking about, that, you know, the fact that you're working alongside people of other religions. Nepal, for those of you who aren't aware, is a closed nation. There are very tight restrictions, perhaps even considerably ever-tightening restrictions on the ability to proselytize or share the gospel. How did you both navigate that tension between clearly the work that you're doing for kingdom impact, like you're making a difference in lives, with also that responsibility that comes with ensuring that where possible, Jesus gets the credit? And I know we could spend an entire hour or more on just this, but even just a little bit of insight for people here to try and just gather, what does that actually look like on a day-to-day level?
So maybe you could do a personal one, and I just talk very briefly about the church.
Yeah.
Like as you said, the church can't go out and preach, but officially there is religious freedom in Nepal, which means you can follow the religion that you were born into, but you're not allowed to change or try to make anybody else to change. And in Nepal, the Christians are very strong that they want Nepalis to hear the gospel from Nepalis. So they don't want us Westerners to go and preach. And because a lot of the ideas is, it's the foreigners come and they bring, and people want some benefits and all of that. Anyway, so we were involved in a local church, and our involvement was just as a member of the church, as a member of small groups, as a member of women's ministry, and just be there and encourage each other. Not that we encourage them only, it's like a real giving and receiving. Yeah. And really pray for them and say there's a lot more people also praying for you, praying for Nepal, praying for the church. And they are very, very brave. They go out into the mountains and preach the gospel, even though they're not supposed to do it.
Yeah, wow.
And a lot of churches have small NGOs that are registered to do education on development issues, and that allows them to travel, and then when they go, they obviously don't just talk about development and hygiene and all of that, but they preach the gospel as well, and they're risking being arrested and all of that. So it's really important that we remember to pray for the church in Nepal. So we were kind of part of an encouragement and member of the church there.
It's a great thing to understand. Yeah. And Neil, you got personal? That's fine, don't worry.
So apart from humility, God also teaches you patience.
Yeah.
I volunteered at an alcohol and rehab centre where I was doing some training once a week, and the person in charge was a Hindu, and I just continued to introduce myself and go and talk to the men and run the sessions, and it was about 3 months that I had been there. And he said to me one morning, he said, you're weird. And I said, oh, why am I weird?
Thank you.
I already
Yeah.
know that. And he said, well, to start with, you're on time. I said, oh, okay. And he said, and you always come here, you're always smiling. You're always so happy. Why is that? And I said, oh, thank you, Lord. So I just answered him very simply. I said, well, you're Hindu and you pray to your God for strength and direction. He said, yeah. I said, well, I'm Christian and I pray to mine as well. And every time I come here, I pray that my words be the ones that your men and you wish to hear. And that makes me extremely happy knowing that he is in charge of the situation. And that conversation went on for the next couple of hours. That was the first time it happened. There were many times after that. It's just a matter of being graceful towards others, of being honest, of showing integrity, love and care, and eventually they come to you and ask you the questions.
Yeah.
So they open the doors themselves. It's a much better way than you trying to open doors.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And I'm sure if you've got more questions about this, which this is a hot topic issue when it comes to international mission, I'm sure that these guys would love to be able to share more stories. We're just going to change direction for a few minutes. Now, Ben Thurley is is he the director of INF? He's definitely up there somewhere. Anyway, he's a good guy from INF and got a relationship with you guys. And with these guys finishing up with INF, he was gracious enough to record a video message, goes for about 5 minutes, for both Neil and Inga and also for our church, just reflecting upon the experience of those 5 years in Nepal and the partnership there. So if you kind of turn your attention to the screen, we'll play that video and then I'll provide Neil and Inga with just a final opportunity to kind of share a few words with our church. We'll pray for them and then we'll spend a bit of time in worship perhaps to close our service. So there it is.
Ben Thurley, I'm the CEO of INF Australia, and thank you so much for making some time and space in the service for me to share a little bit at a long distance. I wish I could be there in person, but I guess this will have to do under the current conditions. And it's wonderful to be able to say a big thank you to Inga and Neil as they finish up their time of service with INF, and to celebrate and acknowledge everything that they were involved with, because it was more than just the work they did. They made contributions to the strength of INF as an organisation through Inga's role mentoring people, particularly some of her female colleagues, overseeing and supporting some of the strategic development planning work, the quality assurance monitoring and evaluation work. Neil's contribution to helping the organisation think through and set up systems for self-care, which is really important in a country like Nepal with so many people working in fairly isolated and remote areas, to be able to have that understanding of how to take care of each other and how to maintain their own health and so on. And then obviously their direct roles. So Inga's direct role as a public health advisor, particularly focused on maternal and child health, supporting those programs which made such a difference in the lives of mothers and children in and around Nepalganj, in those districts, but across the organisation. And Neil's role as a counsellor supporting some local counsellors, but also then working with a number of groups on suicide prevention, awareness raising, and work to help tackle some really big mental health issues in Nepal. So big servant-hearted people who've committed a huge amount of their time, their energy, their insights, their skills to Nepal, driven by their love for Jesus and their love for people, which just flows out of them. It's really evident. When I first met them in Nepalganj, in the Pink Palace, which was their home, a real place of welcome for me, for lots of expats visiting Nepal and stopping by through Nepalganj, for their neighbours, and that sort of open-hearted, servant-hearted, outward-reaching, outward-looking attitude, which they've clearly taken for most of their lives, for those who know them well, but it was so evident in Nepal in the way that they shared who they were, what they knew, and invited others in and shared in the work of caring for people in a whole range of really significant ways. So it's been great getting to know you. I hope and pray that we'll remain friends for the rest of our lives, because you're just such great people. And for Alice Springs Baptist, just want to say thank you. Like, Alice Springs, on a per capita basis, has probably sent and supported more people in Nepal than any other church and any other town in Australia. So quite remarkable, something about the mission heart of your church, and the approach that people take to life and discipleship and witness, which just flows out obviously in Alice Springs, but well beyond even the borders of Australia. So thank you for everything you've done to support and care for Inga and Neil while they were in Nepal. For those who got to travel there and see them, you know just how wonderful a country that is. But I really do ask you to keep Inga and Neil in prayer as they settle into a different stage of life in a new place. But keep Nepal in prayer. As you probably know, going through a very difficult time with COVID, cases really on the rise, and a health system that will struggle to cope with what's going on. We know quite a lot of people already who have become ill with it. So just keep Nepal in your prayers, and keep the church in Nepal in your prayers. It's a Hindu majority country, and in some ways the church is vigorous and reaches out and continues to grow, but there are struggles, and there are groups who really would like to put the lid on the church and keep it in its place. So please keep them in prayer for security and strength, and just an open-hearted, open-handed witness to the generosity and grace of God in Jesus Christ. So thanks everyone, again for your support. Inga and Neil, so sorry I can't be there today, but so glad that you're getting to celebrate and be prayed for and with your faith community at Alice Springs. Thanks everybody.
So he's a CEO, yeah. So sorry, man.
The guy at the top.
I also know he's a really nice guy, so he'll forgive me. Was there any, I suppose, some final things you'd like to share with the church before we pray for you guys as you engage in this next season? I'm sure you got to share a little bit about what this next season looks like.
Yes, so before Neil says the thank yous, I know people want to know what's next. So we have been around in Australia for a little while already, but we have been able to continue to support INF in Nepal. Neil was involved in staff care and support, and you can do that from a distance as well. And I've been involved in some of the COVID readiness and developing guidelines for the organization. But that has all come to an end with the old year. And we have a house in Adelaide, so we will be able to move in there in February when the tenants move out. And we are looking forward to God showing us what is next for us, what that next season will bring. I have picked up some temporary part-time work for a few months to just get us started, and Neil will be able to settle us and find out what he wants to do. And we still hope to be able to go back to Nepal later in the year, because we need to finalize things, say goodbye, and pack our things and bring some things over. So hopefully that will be possible towards the end of the year. And then we also want to swing past Germany to see my parents and family there. But so thank you if you continue to pray for us, especially in this, in these coming months as we settle. We're looking to find a church and work and just see what's next for us after this.
No, I've got the difficult part. Just saying thank you to everyone. I was just reminded that in our lives, where one door closes, another one opens. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all the people that we came to know so lovingly over in Nepal. God had put us with some amazing people who could teach us and also accept our idiosyncrasies and all our mistakes with grace and love. That resulted in a lot of laughs and many, many good times. So dhanyabad mero sathiharu. Secondly, we'd like to thank the ABC, Alice Springs, sorry, I keep thinking ABC, Alice Springs Baptist Church, for commissioning us to go, and both in prayer and in finances, as well as the many supporting roles in which you unknowingly played in our lives. Being able to tap into your services online, particularly like when David was talking, and we just resonate with David and enjoy his preaching so much. We could do that online on the other side of the world, and that's pretty cool, really.
Yeah.
So thank you, David, and everybody else, and yourself as well. Thought you were a little firestone. Other support included prayer support. As I've already alluded to, many times we were told about people praying for us after an event had happened, but they'd prayed for us during that event. And that reached around the world. You know, that for God there's no barriers. Only man puts up barriers. He knocks them down, or he doesn't even pay any attention to them. So thank you very much for helping to sustain us through many challenges and many great times. There's one team that we really appreciate, and that's the mission team. With the ongoing newsletters and the communication that we had with them, this just being able to visualize everybody, and you know, we took you in our hearts, and that gave us so much strength when the flesh was weak. And we'd really like to say a huge thank you, and to the congregation of Alice Springs Baptist Church as a whole. Really, it's really hard to put that into words. I trust I've done it justice. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I can see people looking nervous. Don't worry, I'm not going to do a full sermon. It's all good. I feel like God spoke plenty through what Neil and Inga shared, but I do want to share with you just a short reflection on the new year. And it seems apt, even as I caught up with Neil and Inga on Friday, and we had a brief chat about plans and future and creativity and many other things that were emerging in this post-5-year period. It got me thinking a lot about this idea of a new season. I mean, of course, whenever we cross over to the new year, there's that temptation within us to, create New Year's resolutions, which aren't a bad thing, by the way. New Year's resolutions, that's not all that bad. But at the same time, for many of us, we know, and even statistically, we know that after about a month, I think it's around 75% of New Year's resolutions fade off, and then I think it's 3%, I believe they discovered were sustained into the next 12 months. We know these things don't quite have the longevity that we hope for. But I wonder if part of the reason behind that is because in this new season, or whatever the new looks like for us, so often our focus can be on self-improvement. You know, it's like, this is the thing that I want to do. This is where I want to go. This is where I feel I need to be. And sometimes even this idea of the new year can come across with this idea of a clean slate. It's like, okay, it's a new year, clean slate, right? I'm going to start afresh and we're going to set forward this new trajectory. But the truth is, a new year is not a clean slate, because wherever you go, there you are. Okay? A new year is a good thing. It's a good marker. It's a good indicator. It's a shared moment that we can all kind of propel and shift our direction slightly. But the truth is, a new year is not a new clean slate, because wherever you go, there you are. The stuff that you've carried in from the previous year will still be there, but perhaps you can bring a fresh perspective to it, or perhaps even a God perspective to it, if you are indeed a follower of Jesus. Because I believe that God is for us. He is for the new. He is for the new plans. I remember even one theologian back in the early centuries described Jesus Christ as the new song who burst forth new life into new territory. And I always remember that phrase, because we want the new song. We want to embrace the new song and what God has for us. But the question is, how do we approach the new, our new year, our new season, our new plans, in a way that approaches God with a sense of integrity, in a way that actually resonates with his heart? And I'm just going to share for, I reckon, 5 or 6 minutes on this. I just want to quickly look at Solomon and his story and what we can learn about the heart of God when it comes to us approaching God with the new. So I don't know what the new is for you. Maybe it's new family, and I know it is for me. Maybe it's a new job. Maybe it's a new church. Maybe it's a new location. I don't know what the new is for you. But what does it look like to not just focus on how we can achieve that, but we can invite God into the new? Because when we look here in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 1 to 15, we see Solomon. Now, let's be honest, Solomon, he had a bit of a rocky story when it comes to the Bible. He had his good moments and his bad moments. But nevertheless, this was at the beginning of his story, and there was something new that was taking place, which was essentially a young man with a kingdom at his hands, right? And so I just want to quickly just go through this section. I won't dwell too long. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and married one of his daughters. Now, there's a whole lot of context in there. This is not a good thing. Okay, this is a classic example of doing something bad because you think that the outcome's going to be good. Okay, so it's like, because he brought her to live in the city of David until he could finish building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around his city. So his agenda was, I want to finish the temple. I want to do this good thing that God has called me to do, and I'm going to achieve it with this pretty bad method, which is essentially creating an alliance with the people who we were in captivity with for 400 years. Anyway, there's a whole lot of context there, but nevertheless, that's what's going on. At that time, the people of Israel sacrificed their offerings at local places of worship, for a temple honoring the name of the Lord had not yet been built. Solomon loved the Lord and followed all the decrees of his father David, except that Solomon too offered sacrifices and burnt incense at the local places of worship. Okay, so there's this alternate worship going on. There's not a lot of detail, but there's these alternate places of worship that are obviously being used for cult worship, and other gods were being worshipped there too. But because they didn't have a temple, Solomon said, I'll use this place. He was trying his best. And we try our best too, okay? We don't always get it right, okay? So let's show a bit of grace toward young Solomon here. The most important of these places of worship was at Gibeon, so the king went there and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings. Wow, he didn't half measure it, did he? You could tell 1,000, when you kind of see 1,000, you kind of get this sense of, I've got an agenda here. I'm really wanting to actually acknowledge God. I'm not just going to do this once, twice, 1,000 offerings. And yeah, it's not the proper place, but I'm trying my best, okay? This is what we've got Solomon here. He's got this new situation, this new season ahead of him, and he's actually looking for God's direction, right? Even in his faults, even in his flaws, he's looking for God's direction. Is our story any different, right? We enter into a new system. Wherever we go, there we are with our baggage, with our history. Maybe we don't do things ideally, but we bring whatever we have and we try to give our best in the hope that God will give us a sense of direction as to what this new looks like, yeah? And this is what Solomon did. And that night, the Lord, in his grace, in his mercy, in his willingness to enter the brokenness of our lives and this world, appeared to Solomon in a dream. And God said, what do you want? Ask and I will give it to you. That's a pretty awesome thing for God to say, right? This is like, hey, I know there's this new season ahead and there's this sense of unknowns, you don't know how you're going to cope. But, what do you want? Ask and I'll give it to you. Well, thank you, God. Thank you for that offering. I mean, if God offered that to you, like what initially jumps to mind? You know, isn't it funny? Like what naturally jumps to mind? Anyway, this is what we see Solomon reply with. He said, "You showed great and faithful love to your servant, my father, David, because he was honest and true and faithful to you. And you've continued to show this great and faithful love to him today by giving him a son, that is himself, to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord my God, you have made me king instead of my father David, but I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. And here I am in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous they cannot be counted. So give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours?" Now notice that when God asks the question, hey, what is it that you want? And I actually believe that our good and generous God, as we approach a new season, as we approach him with integrity, actually wants to ask this. Hey, God's saying, hey, what is it that you want here? If you're inviting God into the process, which we all should, of course, he actually wants to play a part. But there's something beautiful about God saying, well, okay, what is it that you want? And note what Solomon makes a distinction between. He says, you have made me king, which is about position. It's about authority. It's about power, right? It's about status. It's about control. That's what a king has. And so he makes this distinction between what God has given him in terms of his position and his own posture or his own sense of self, where he identifies, but I am like a child. And so there's this temptation when we're asked, even by God, hey, what is it that you want? In this new season, what does it look like? Where are you going? And it's tempting for us to be like, well, I'd like this kind of position, this kind of power, this kind of status, this kind of influence. I'd like all these different things. But what we see in Solomon as he approaches God in a new season, and God does respond well to him, is that rather than focusing on power and prestige, he ends up focusing on his own state of being, his own posture. And this is what we see in God's response. God is far more interested in our posture than our position. As we enter a new season, God is far more interested in what's going on in our heart, the kind of works he wants to do in our heart, than any kind of position or even influence that we may have, right? Because that kind of stuff will come. That kind of stuff will happen in time, but it starts with the state of our heart. And I think Solomon, for the first time, maybe the few times in his life, we don't really know, he understood this. It wasn't going to be about status. It wasn't going to be about power, at least not yet. It was actually about his heart. It says in verse 10, the Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. God is far more interested in our posture than our position. And so I'm not going to spend long on this, but I encourage you to reflect on what this new season, this new year looks like for you. Maybe like Neil and Inga, you're going through a change, a significant change in work or in family or in where you're going to give your energies. And as you come to God with your request, God, be in this new season in some way, be in this new job in some way, be in whatever it looks like. Can I encourage you, as he responds and says, ask for what it is that you want, essentially saying, what part do you want me to play? I want to encourage you to not go with the instinct that defines this world, which is status, prestige, power, and influence, but rather choose posture. Choose to do and invite God into those areas of your heart that actually need work, into wisdom, into compassion, into prioritizing relationship over responsibility, whatever it might be. What I love is that in Matthew 20, Jesus has a similar situation when the mother of James and John come to him along with them and says, hey, Jesus, I came to ask a favor. And he says, what is it you request? In your kingdom, please let my two sons sit in places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on your left. And Jesus is like, you don't know what you're asking here, because you hear the power there, right? The position, on your right, on your left, power, prestige. This is what we're all about. It's like, are you guys able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? Oh, yes, we're able, they say. And he says, yeah, you're going to drink my bitter cup, but I I'm not the one who decides who will sit on my right or my left, for my Father has chosen those places. And of course, the 10 other disciples weren't very happy with this. They were indignant. But I love what Jesus says here in verse 25, and this is what I'm going to end with, this crux of choosing posture over position. It says, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over people. They're all about power. When there's an opportunity to gain something, they're about power. And officials flaunt their authority over those under them, but among you it will be different. Alice Springs Baptist Church, as you enter this new season, as you enter this new year, may it be different among us than among the world. For whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So how can we approach God with our new year or new season? Let's come this year with an openness that he might transform our heart, not striving for power, but allowing the work that God does in our posture, in our response to him and response to others, shape our trajectory. Let me pray. God, I want to thank you that you're a great and generous God, that even we can see in the brokenness of Solomon and his broken actions, you chose to still approach him and ask him what it is that he wanted from you. And God, that in our brokenness, we can still approach you and you will ask, what is it that you want from me? And so God, when you ask God, would our response be different to the response of the world? Would we not be scraping for power and scraping for status and scraping for position, Lord? Would what we desire to do be less than who we desire to be and become? And God, as you shape our hearts, as you prompt us to be better fathers, better wives, better mothers, daughters, brothers, sisters, friends, as you shape us, Lord, would you be shaping our hearts? And would we see the fruit of that in beautiful ways this year, in perhaps ways we didn't even expect. In your name, amen.